The COVID-19 pandemic has thrown our world into chaos. But what gets lost in the midst of the statistics and stories being shared in the news is how each one of our individual lives have been dramatically altered as we struggle with the fallout of this health and economic crisis. Are you stuck at home feeling trapped and helpless as this unfolds? Do you feel anxious, overwhelmed, angry, depressed? You aren't the only one feeling that way. My name is Rick Guttersohn, and one of the things I've learned over the years as a grief and loss educator is that many of the difficult emotions that we experience are actually connected to loss. What if I told you that the fear and the anxiety that you're experiencing right now during this pandemic is actually a form of grief? When you think of grief, you think about sadness and tears, and you might be saying, I'm not crying, this isn't grief. But grief is so much more than just tears or sadness. And grief is a response to loss and not just to death. And so in the midst of this pandemic, there's an incredible amount of losses that each of us are experiencing. And the purpose of this video is really to give you a simple structure that you can apply to your life that's going to help you identify kind of 4 key terms that we use in helping people understand grief, but be able to then apply it to your situation so that you can understand both the losses that you might be experiencing, the responses to those losses, so that you can ultimately process the emotions and other challenges that come along with those experiences. The first term that we're going to talk about today is what we're going to call our primary loss. Our primary loss is a significant loss that we're experiencing. They also might be things that your family or your partner or spouse are experiencing as well. The number one factor that's going to kind of shape the way that we grieve is the type of loss that we've experienced. The most common thing that comes to mind is experiencing the death of a loved one. If your family's been impacted by this virus and you've experienced a death as a result of it, I just want to say I'm sorry. It's so hard, and there's so many complicating factors that go along with that loss that make it really challenging just to grieve. One of the primary losses that is happening because of this pandemic is the loss of our relationship. The proximity to our friends and family and loved ones is creating challenges in staying connected. Another primary loss that we often experience is the loss of health. So it could be that someone is feeling sick or diagnosed with this disease, but so they're experiencing symptoms that are devastating for several weeks. Another type of loss in this pandemic is financial security. And another one that comes up to a lot of people is the loss of a special event. The special event may be a wedding, or it might be a graduation, a ceremony, a birthday, an anniversary, anything that you were looking forward to, but because of the limitations on gatherings of people, you weren't able to celebrate that. When we're talking about all these different types of losses, especially when you're looking at a death versus another type of loss, it's so important to avoid the comparison trap. Your loss is your loss, and your loss is going to be different than other people's losses. And so it's really important to avoid the comparison trap because it doesn't do anything but trap us or keep us stuck. And it's not helpful in processing and understanding the losses that we're experiencing. The second term that we're going to cover today is a term that we're calling a secondary loss. And this is a term that's probably less familiar to you. But it's really important to understand that the primary loss that we've experienced is something that's more obvious. It's a significant loss in our life. But the secondary loss is all of these other, maybe more subtle losses that we experience that are a result of that primary loss. Experiencing the loss of a special event, there's these other secondary moments or memories that are affiliated with that first primary loss. When we're talking about a relationship or a death or anything like that, there's also losses of role or responsibility or titles that accompany that loss. It might be something more subtle, like the loss of freedom or the loss of control as a result of the social isolation. When you also think about other types of losses, it's the loss of routine or the loss of independence. These are the more subtle losses that we experience, but they're significantly enhance or complicate the grief or the emotional response that we have to that primary loss. The third term that we're going to cover today is really, really important for us to understand because it's what makes our grief and our emotional response unique to us. And these are what we call complicating factors. A complicating factor is an internal or external factor that's going to shape or add additional stress to our emotional response to loss. So the external factors are outside circumstances or outside situations like family stress or family dynamics Maybe caring for our kids at home. If your situation has been impacted by school closings, then you're going to have additional stress on your situation because not only are you trying to work from home, but now you've got your kids at home and you've got these other challenges that significantly increase the stress that you're experiencing. It could be a lack of support system or other types of responsibilities at home. It could even be legal or financial issues that you're trying to navigate. The other part of that is the internal factors. These are more about who we are and how we're wired. Our age, our gender, our race, our personality, even our coping style, if we're more logical or we're more emotional. Our belief system, the culture that you're part of, the worldview that you're a part of, other health issues that you're experiencing, and also past losses that you've experienced. Each of these factors play a significant role in shaping or adding stress to the types of loss that we're experiencing and the emotional responses to that loss. The fourth term that we're going to cover today is what we're going to call grief reactions. And this is the way that we're responding to those primary losses and those secondary losses. Because we usually think of emotions when it comes to grief, but there's a lot of types of responses that are both emotional, physical, social, mental. If we can identify the types of responses and reactions to the loss, it's going to help us really be more in tune with not only is what I'm experiencing normal, but I now have the ability to kind of process through that. There's a worksheet that accompanies this video that's going to really help you unpack a lot of what we covered in this video, because there's more to cover about grief and loss than what we can cover in a very short video like this. And yet there's so many of you that are going through very different, unique situations. And so my hope is that this worksheet can be really beneficial in supporting the content that we covered in this video. In the second video, we're going to be spending some time talking about 5 simple steps that we can apply to process the emotional responses to these losses that we've experienced, so that ultimately we can experience peace in the midst of this pandemic. Thank you for watching.